Hey everyone, Pastor Daniel here, doing a video from inside the church today. It is very, very cold. Looks like it's going to warm up finally around here the next couple weeks, before it probably snows again in April, but right in time for Easter, obviously. But I want to do a video today, giving some of my thoughts about a week later after the big news headline about the United Methodist Church denomination having their General Conference in St. Louis last week. One of the biggest headlines of the week, and maybe probably the biggest religious news headline for the rest of 2019, unless something even bigger happens. But basically, a summary, you can look this up online, what happened. But the summary was there's General Conference, which meets every few years or couple years, with delegates from the UMC all across the world. The UMC is a global denomination, not just an American or North American one. So they had delegates and they debated whether to change or update their policy, their bylaws about LGBT individuals and really the lifestyle of LGBT people, homosexuality. So should they change their views on marriage to now allow clergy to officiate same-sex weddings? Should they allow clergy to be in same-sexual relationships? Should they admit members into the church who live a same-sex lifestyle, LGBT lifestyle? Not that they're oriented that way, but just the lifestyle. Should they change their views on that? And the UMC is basically divided on that, and they had three plans that they were going to choose one of the three. The traditional plan, as the title suggests, says let's keep our current policy on that, and also allowed a gracious exit strategy to churches who disagreed with the traditional view, and to keep their church properties, which is pretty significant. The one church plan, which was is seen by as many as a compromise plan, was the main plan that the bishops all voted on. And that would allow each UMC church to practice according to their conscience. You could have some LGBT affirming churches, some LGBT welcoming but non-affirming churches. And then the final plan, the simple plan, was full embracing of sort of LGBT theology and lifestyle and whatnot. By a vote of 53% to 47%, of maybe 1,500 or so delegates that got to vote, they voted for the traditional plan. So that was the big news as of last week. And they have until, I think, 2021 for certain churches to figure out what they want to do if they disagree with the simple or with the traditional plan. And there's also a judicial review process that's going to happen with the traditional plan to see if it's even constitutional and things of that nature. I just want to share my thoughts. Obviously, I'm not Methodist. I'm Presbyterian, but wanted to share my thoughts on a major religious news headline. The first thought is that, just looking at this phrase that we hear in our culture over the last several years, that, we need to be on the right side of history. We need to be on the right side of history. Especially when it comes to issues of marriage, gender, and sexuality. The cultural pressure in America gets ramped up about, hey, you religious folks need to get on the right side of history. If you don't jump on these bandwagons, you won't have churches in the future. No one's going to be you're not going to appeal to anyone. You're going to be on the wrong side of history. And that can scare a lot of, Christians and religious folks. But obviously this story shows that that's a false mantra. Really, just the presidential election 2016 shows that the future is foggy. Who would have predicted Donald Trump as president? There's so many things we can't predict about the future. The future is foggy, even from a secular perspective. We get to our Christian worldview, our view of history is such that, if you just look at even church history, the 2nd century, the amazing document you need to read called the Letter to Diognetus. And in it says basically that, hey, these earliest Christians, they live in the flesh, but not according to the flesh. They have children, but they don't let their offspring go out and rot. They don't basically commit infanticide. They marry and have, spouses, but they don't share their spouses. They share their tables. They care for the poor and they care for our poor. Every land is their fatherland, but every fatherland is really foreign to them. They live according to earthly laws, but then in their lives they transcend these laws because they live according to heavenly laws, basically. And these Christians were countercultural, not living on the right side of history in the Roman Empire, but less than a couple hundred years later, the church would topple the Roman Empire. Who would have predicted that to come? But also just from our Christian worldview of creation, fall, redemption, consummation, the whole notion of being on the right side of history is irrelevant because what matters is being on the right side of redemptive history. If we are found in Jesus Christ, we are found on the right side of redemptive history. We need to be found in Him at the very end of history when He comes back to consummate and redeem finally all things. So we shouldn't listen to that mantra of being on the right side of history. And if we need some extra encouragement on that, this UMC storyline and votes should teach us that. Also, this is so interesting. I've been more intrigued by the sociology, just the social dynamics of what's been going on in the UMC. Basically, the liberal wing in the United Methodist Church is basically white and Western. White and American or Western. Because if you just took a vote of all the delegates, UMC delegates in America, they would have voted overwhelmingly to go with the one church plan, maybe even the simple plan. Probably the one church plan because they want to keep people together in theory, but knowing that they're all going to give in anyway in the end, or they'll be forced to. But if you just took the vote for the global UMC folks, it would have been overwhelmingly in favor of the traditional plan. And that's what eventually won out, barely. So the liberal wing of the UMC is white and Western. The conservative Orthodox wing are global and ethnic. We just really need to chew on that for a little bit. And I think sometimes conservative American Christians, Orthodox American Christians we get to our little American bubble and we think, wow, the world's getting worse, and the church is more and more compromising on important issues. That's only if you just live in your American bubble. If you see what God's doing on a global scale in the global church, we should be much encouraged by the growth of the church and maintaining the gospel, maintaining orthodox biblical teaching on a number of issues. Not perfectly, there's some issues, but we should be overall encouraged with gospel fruitfulness and the growth of the kingdom in the world. So I just think the social dynamics are pretty amazing to think about. And, just the whole notion that, the more liberal wing of the UMC, just kind of liberal Christian, pastors and theologians, for the last few years have been saying things like, we have been compromised in our theology. We have basically allowed our theology become colonized. We need to decolonize our theology. We need to listen to our minority and ethnic brothers and sisters. So we hear those things, and that finally kind of happens at the UMC General Conference, where the ethnic and global voices win the vote. But the more white and liberal voices are not happy about that. And it seems that the ones who have colonized our theology are white and liberal people, not conservative Orthodox brothers and sisters around the world. So that's pretty interesting to think about. It just fascinates me. No matter what you think that's right or wrong, it just fascinates me that, hey, you want your ethnic brothers and sisters to have a voice, but not when it contradicts, your golden calf or your idol you've been worshiping for a while. But just to get more down to another, I think, lesson from this is the global church is an underutilized resource for the American church, and just for Orthodox Western Christians. That's why I love the ministry of Third Mill Ministries, headed up by Richard Pratt, one of my former teachers at Reformed Theological Seminary. They're trying to offer basically free biblical, Orthodox, and Reformed Presbyterian education, seminary education to church and global church leaders around the world. And they're doing it in an amazing way. The global church is so underutilized for us. There are so many great voices and theologians and wonderful pastors out there, and men, but also women out there, lay women who are out there doing amazing work. And we need to listen to their voices. Utilize them as a resource to help us become more faithful to follow Jesus. So if I just go beyond that, though, and by the way, I think we can do that because technology allows us to do that. We have better communication, easier to travel and communicate with people around the world than ever before. So we can definitely utilize that resource and have them teach and disciple us. But here's an interesting idea, something I've been thinking about for a couple years, actually a few years now, before all this stuff happened. And that is, what would it look like to call on a global ecumenical council of churches and denominations to put out a short but orthodox biblical statement on marriage, gender, and sexuality? There have been good books and good parachurch ministry statements on these issues, especially in the American church. A couple years ago, we had this thing called the Nashville Statement, put out by a lot of folks from the Council of Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. And it was a good statement. I actually signed it initially because I thought, well, I agree with like 99% of it. May quibble with a word or phrase here and there, but it was a fine statement. But I've come to regret signing it, not because I think it's a bad statement, but because as a Presbyterian, I have a high ecclesiology, and I think that we need to take advantage of actual church and ecclesial bodies to come up with these statements, not parachurch bodies. I'm not against parachurch per se, but I don't think the parachurch should be at the front of the train. I don't think it should be the one that's wagging the tail. I think it should be the parachurch should be the tail that's being wagged, or the caboose at the end of the train. It should not be the train engine. The church, the ecclesia, the assembly of God, that's what should be the one driving the train. That should be the engine. That should be the one wagging the tail. And here's the thing. The last time we had an ecumenical council, depends on which ones you like, but basically you can go back to Constantinople and things like that. Maybe it's only like Nicaea and Chalcedon. It's been 1,500 years or so since the last ecumenical council. What would the headlines be if, denominations in America, plus the global church, plus, you can include Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox in there because they're part of broad Christendom. But basically the global church, all together with delegates from our denominations, and communicate in various ways through the technology we have today, we would probably come up in pretty short time a short, simple, but orthodox statement on marriage, gender, and sexuality. And that would make huge headlines. It would show the one church around the world, even though we're divided amongst denominations and sometimes by race and class. Wow, we came together and to do another ecumenical council. It's pretty. I think it'd be pretty significant. It would have a lot of impact and be a gospel witness to the watching, unbelieving world, actually. So I'm in favor of that. I don't know how to get that started. I'm just a pastor in Central New York, but that's what I'm for. Also, just a final thing, just for me thinking about as a Presbyterian minister in the Presbyterian Church in America now, in the PCA. I would love for the PCA, even though we have America in our name, I would love if we were a global denomination like the United Methodist Church. I think it's pretty cool that they were a global denomination. Honestly, I think we need to at least discuss and keep praying every year for uniting Presbyterian conservative denominations in America. I think it's kind of silly that, I love NAPARC and all that, but I think it's kind of silly that we all have our separate denominations. And that's just my opinion. Many disagree with me on that. But more than that, it'd be great if we were a global denomination. We have PCA, but let's change the A for something else. I don't know. The PCG, Presbyterian Church Around the Globe. I don't know what it'd be. But just global churches, churches in China, in Europe, Australia, Africa, South America that are part of our denomination and vote with us and worship with us. Maybe we can do a general assembly down there, a general assembly out of America. I would love to do that. Maybe it doesn't happen every year, but that's okay. But what would it take for my denomination to become more global in its orientation? I would love to pursue that and see the higher ups. I'm not a higher up at all. I'm a small little tadpole in a big pond. I was a small tadpole in the ARP, which was a small pond. Just as small now, but in a bigger pond. So not my decision, but love to see our leaders discuss it. But anyway, I'm encouraged by the faithful brothers and sisters around the globe in the UMC. I hope it means revival for that denomination and that they become more faithful, more orthodox in certain areas. But anyway, those are just some comments and some thoughts in the aftermath from those headlines from last week. Feel free to leave a comment, and we'll talk to you soon. See ya.